Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. This is the podcast to listen to if you're an aspiring writer or an author who wants to be more successful. On this show, you'll learn how to write and launch a book successfully, all from the top authors and people just like you who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the author of the book called Published, and the CEO of selfpublishing.com. For free training on how to publish a book that sells 10,000 copies, go to selfpublishing.com/free training.
Get your door hangers in place, smash the emojis, because our next speaker is an accomplished entrepreneur. She's an author and a motivational speaker. She's the founder of Headbands of Hope that donates to a child with cancer for every headband sold. She's also the founder of the Mic Drop Workshop, which empowers women to become public speakers. She has authored 2 best-selling books, Chasing the Bright Side and Create Your Bright Ideas. Ladies and gentlemen, Jess Ekstrom.
Oh, I am so happy to be here. Honestly, feel like I should be an attendee. I just gave birth about a month and a half ago, and my manuscript that I've been working on for a while is pretty dusty. And so seeing all of you commit
what's
and
your
having these accountability programs are amazing. So
Cool.
Keep up the great work. Okay, so maybe some of you are still thinking like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to write a book. I want to share with you this quote that is one of my favorite quotes.
No, it's perfect, bro. I do the same thing.
Hold on, wait. Am I on the wrong screen? 1 second. We just practiced this. Boop, boop, boop. I want to do it like weatherman style where you can see behind me, but I don't think that's going to work like we did in Tech Check. So I'll just go ahead and share this screen. There we go. Okay, now it's working. Someone out there right now is going to write someone else's favorite book of all time and is currently wondering if their story in their head is worth telling. So maybe this is you. Maybe you're like, I don't know if I should be doing this. Well, I'm here to tell you that someone out there needs exactly what you have to say. And I'm going to show you how I realized this for me. So my story begins in Disney World. I don't know if we have any Disney fans out there, but I was a photo pass photographer back in the day. I did the Disney college program when I was in school. So I worked in Hollywood Studios in the Magic Kingdom, and I absolutely loved it. But my favorite thing that I got to do was I got to photograph kids that were there on their wish through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And I fell in love with Make-A-Wish, got back to school and interned at Make-A-Wish. And I don't know if you've ever done an internship before, but sometimes you're not doing, the most glamorous things. I wasn't organizing these huge events or like calling Taylor Swift to do a wish. I was doing so much behind the scenes work, medical release forms, cold calling people for money and getting hung up on. And on paper, it looked really boring and really tedious, but it was the first time in my life where it didn't matter what I was doing because I was so clearly connected to why I was doing it. Every single thing I did, I could draw a straight line to helping Make-A-Wish come true. So it was towards the end of this internship, and I was given a little bit more responsibility from my boss, and she assigned me a wish child. And I got to be the coordinator of her wish, which I was so excited about. This girl, her name was Renee. She's 4 years old. She wanted to go to Disney World, but specifically, she wanted to go to Disney to meet Sleeping Beauty. She was very clear about the terms of this agreement. And so I planned a going away party for her and all of her friends that was princess themed. I called the parks to make sure that Sleeping Beauty could be there for all of their meals. And little by little, things started to come together with this wish. And it was about a week before she was scheduled to go to Disney World, she started to have some symptoms flare up and started not feeling well. And they did some scans. She had a brain tumor. And up until that point, they thought things had been looking promising. But in the scan, they realized that there was something that they had missed. And she wasn't in well enough condition to go to Disney that following week. And so they had to cancel her wish. And I remember being in the office that day and thinking to myself, like, this can't be the story. because we have these experiences in our life that we can't control. We can't control what the weather is outside. We can't control, if our neighbor's dog is barking while we're trying to speak at Author Advantage Live. But these are our experiences, these tangible moments in our life that we can't control. But our story is what we think and what we do next. Our story is how we internalize all of our experiences and how it leads to our decision-making and our actions. So I couldn't control the experience. I couldn't help her go on her wish, but maybe I could rewrite the story. So I went onto Google and looked up local costume shops in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was from. And a few hours later, I arrived on her doorstep, dressed as Sleeping Beauty, and did my best to make her wish come true that day. And I brought her this matching dress and this crown that said Princess Renee, and read her the story of Sleeping Beauty, and spent the whole day with her and her family in character, and they totally bought it. And I'll tell y'all, it was the clearest before and after moment of my life. And I think what was the really important part of this was learning that we can never control what happens to us, but we can control what we think and what we do next. And this is what book writing and speaking is about, is taking all of your experiences and making them universal to others where they can learn something from you. And one of the things I had noticed was kids like Renee, who would lose their hair to chemotherapy, they would be offered a wig or they'd be given a hat to cover up their heads. And a lot of them loved to wear headbands after hair loss. So many of them would walk into the office with like a flower crown or like a cool bandana. And I just thought it was the coolest gesture of confidence that they wanted to own their experience instead of hiding from it. And so this was this little spark that ignited inside of my head. I was like, you know what? Maybe this is something. And maybe this is what your book idea felt like too. It wasn't this all of a sudden the clouds part and angels, start singing and birds start chirping. You were like, it's like a little match flicks on in the back of your head, and you have to make a decision. You have to decide, am I just going to let this match die out? Or am I going to give it oxygen? Am I going to give it tinder? Am I going to make it into something bigger? And a lot of times when we think about starting something, whether it's a book or a business, we can overcomplicate it. But really, at its core, it's about creating what you wish existed, which is exactly what Chandler did with this community and amazing business that he built. And this is what I did with Headbands of Hope. I said, okay, what if I started a business that for every headband I sell, I donate one to a child with an illness? And so this was my grand idea. I was like, okay, I'm going to start this business. Meanwhile, I am now a junior in college studying communications, couldn't even spell entrepreneur, still have to use spell check. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm going to keep it real on here. And so I decided to just look at what I had, what was within my control. I remember thinking like, okay, I need a logo. So I went over to the graphic design school. Mind you, I had no dollars, no funding. I didn't even know what things might cost. And so I decided to just try to use what was within my control. So I went over to the graphic design school, went into a class that I was not enrolled in, told the teacher what I was doing. And I was like, hey, just spitballing here, but you know what would be a great idea is if for your next class assignment, everyone had to make me a logo and I got to pick the best one. Doesn't that sound like a learning opportunity? And that was how I got this first logo. And little by little, things started to come together, not by focusing on winning the Super Bowl, but just by getting the first down. And that is what book writing is. If you think, oh my gosh, I got to write 60,000 words. I think I was hearing, I can't remember whose name it was, but speaking before this, she was like sentence by sentence. That's why like Bird by Bird is such a great book for writers. Just don't worry about winning the Super Bowl. Just get the first down. This applies to business. This applies to books and so many other things in our life where we just want it instantly. So, but I will tell you that Headbands of Hope is now a multi-million-dollar business. We're the official headband provider for the NBA and WNBA teams. We're sold in Kohl's. We've had celebrities wear our headbands like Lauren Conrad and Zooey Deschanel and even the Kardashians, which that can either be good news or bad news, depending on where you are on the Kardashian spectrum. But what I will say is that Headbands of Hope success 12 years later wasn't from my experience because I had none, wasn't through investors or funding because I also had none, and it wasn't through publicists or these huge media hits. It was through story. It was through looking at my story and how I came here to build this and using it as a foundation to not just spread the word about Headbands of Hope, but open up all of these other revenue streams. So my first book was Chasing the Bright Side. And here I am finding it at Walmart next to Michelle Obama's book, which was a very cool moment. And this first book, Chasing the Bright Side, was the story of starting Headbands of Hope, but also teaching people how we can use optimism to create the world that we want to live in. And then my second book, Create Your Bright Ideas, is a middle grade book that shows kids how to create their bright ideas. Both of these, I will tell you, because we're keeping it real on here, both of these were published by HarperCollins, which was great. But for this next book that I'm working on, I am self-publishing it, and I have a lot of reasons why. We can talk about that during the Q&A. But this other part of story that I discovered, not just through writing books, was speaking and sharing my story on stage. I remember the first time a school, it was Marshall University, emailed me and said, "What is your fee to come speak?" And I said, "Come again? You want to pay me to come talk to your students?" Like, this was insane to me. I didn't even realize that this was something that you could get money for. And so I just started speaking for free. For my first gig was for a slice of pizza at schools in these like small stages, really anyone that would give me airtime, until I started to get enough reps and get good enough at telling my story and how it can apply to someone else, till eventually the stages got bigger. And this is how I actually got introduced to selfpublishing.com, was at John Maxwell's event, which I keynoted in between John Maxwell and Deion Sanders, which was a heck of a lineup. And I was also 7 months pregnant at the time. So I think this was photoshopped to not show my sweat. But this was the way that I started to be able to get some legs behind Headbands of Hope, but also sell my books and make money through speaking. But let me tell you, when I started to get on bigger stages and maybe some more like corporate and business stages, I would always ask the event, "Thank you, for booking me to speak when we're on our call. What was it about me and my story? Why are you bringing me in to speak?" And I will tell you a call that I had that shook me to my core, and it happened multiple times. The guy on the other end, the meeting planner, was like, "I'm going to be honest. I don't know anything about you. We just needed a woman." I'm like, what? Did I just teleport back to the 1950s? Like, what year am I in? This is crazy. And so I started to do some research and realized that less than 30% of paid public speakers are women. And that number has actually gone down in recent years. So again, just like Chandler, solving problems through solutions like community and bringing people together, I decided I was going to rent out the bottom floor of this restaurant in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I live. And I put up this Eventbrite. I had to go back and dig deep in my Eventbrite thing. See, look, I think this was like 2018. And said, any woman that wants to learn the ropes of public speaking, show up. I will have wine and cheese, and I will tell you how to do it. The room was packed. There was people that were like, "I can't make it," or "I don't live close by. Can you put this online?" So I was like, okay, why not? So I put it on in the first ever mic drop workshop, and it was made to help women launch their speaking career. And now we have trained thousands of women all over the world to make an impact and an income through public speaking. But what I will say is that the women who do this, who have books, will get booked more, and they will sell more books. It's a yin and a yang, becoming an author and becoming a speaker. It gives you the credibility as an author to speak. And then when you speak, you'll sell more books. And I will show you how to do that. So the first 3 ways that I just like low-hanging fruit that you all can start doing today to get started as a paid speaker and sell books at the same time, because it's not an either or, it's a both and. The first thing that I teach in Mic Drop Workshop, this is like phase 1. And I actually have to remind myself of this all the time. I call it being a lighthouse speaker. So I can't see your hands right now, but if you could just raise your hand if you get nervous before you speak. And I'm going to keep my hand raised because I was nervous right before this. I still get nervous before I speak. But what I've learned is that nerves don't mean that I'm not prepared. It means that I care. But there's a difference between nerves of, I want to be perfect, and nerves of, I want to make sure I'm helpful. So let me show you the difference. A spotlight speaker is typically how we think about speaking. We go up there, we think about like the big TED stages, and you want to go up there and be perfect. And you think, what will everyone think of me? A spotlight speaker is shining the light on themselves. What will everyone think of me? How will I be perceived? I want to be perfect. I don't want to mess up. I want everyone to like me. A spotlight speaker has the light on themselves. And guess what? This is easy to do, but this is the number one way to make you nervous and also not serve your audience because you're just thinking about yourself. So what I want you to do is I want you to shift the light from being a spotlight speaker to being a lighthouse speaker. And I know I'm like blocking this in my weatherman thing, but I can send you the slides too. So a spotlight speaker, what does everyone think of me? A lighthouse speaker shines a light on the audience. How can I best guide the audience? A lighthouse isn't looking for the attention. It's looking to serve and guide. And that is what makes the best speakers. And then when you get up there as a lighthouse, you're less nervous because you're like, it's not about me. If I mess up, it's fine as long as I'm serving the audience. So the number one thing you can do is shift from being a spotlight speaker to a lighthouse speaker. That is like I do that every single time I speak. I get into the mindset of, am I a spotlight right now? If I am, how can I step in mentally to being a lighthouse? Second thing I want you to do to become a paid public speaker is develop a speaker statement. Why? Because you want to make it easy for people to understand how you help them. When you talk about a book or a podcast, if you're just like, yeah, it's just really good, probably no one's going to listen to it. But if you're like, oh, this is what it does, this is how it helps, make it easy for people to talk about you. So this is our framework that we use in Mic Drop Workshop. I help blank. What's the desired outcome? What's the goal? By blank. What's the method? So I'll give you an example of mine. I help people expand their outer voice by helping them train their inner thoughts. And when you look at all of my companies, my speaking, and my books, all of this falls under my speaker statement. From Chasing the Bright Side, Create Your Bright Ideas, to Amplify, my podcast. All of this is helping people expand their outer voice by helping them train their inner thoughts. Some of our students have some good ones too that I'll show. Antonetta, I help people reach their highest potential by teaching them the power of consistently cultivating courage. Nicole, I help close the gender power gap by helping women upgrade their careers. Make it easy for people to talk about you. Whether you're a speaker or an author, it doesn't matter. Create a speaker statement. So what about you? Put it in the chat. What's your speaker statement? I help people blank. What's the goal? What's the desired outcome that you want them to have when they read your book, hear you speak, follow you on social media? By blank. What is the method? What are your fingerprints? How do you help them get there? The third way that you can start to become a paid public speaker is by picking a lane. I love to chase shiny things. I'm like, oh, what's that over there? What's this over here? Decide what you want to be known for. I'm not saying that we have to be this like fit in a box and be a one-dimensional human, but what I am saying is by picking a speaker statement and then by picking an audience, a lane that you know you can help, you are going to make your job so much easier and you're going to convert higher. Because I call this being when you're like, I want to do everything for everyone. My book is for everyone. My audience is everybody. I call that being a Cheesecake Factory speaker. Now, no hate to the Cheesecake Factory. I'm sure that some people love them. I am not in that tribe. I want to go somewhere that does not have a 20-page menu. I want to go to a restaurant that's like, we have the best burger and fries of all time. And that's what we do. And that's what we do well. I don't want to go to a restaurant that's like, we can make a burger. We can also make sushi. And also here are tacos. I don't know what you're known for. So pick a lane. So what is a no-brainer audience that needs your message? When you think about your book or your speaker statement or what you want to be known for, I want you to think about one audience. This is how you can get started speaking. What is a no-brainer audience that needs your message? Here's just bubble map some audiences that you can consider. Students, colleges and high schools have budgets to bring speakers. Student government, fraternity, sorority life, first-year students, orientations. This is how I got, for the first 2 years of my speaking career, I exclusively spoke at colleges. And then that was how I got a bunch of reps in. Women's groups, ladies, if you're out there are so many women's events that are looking for speakers. A lot of corporations have employee resource groups, ERGs, that have a spotlight on women where they're looking for women speakers. Corporations do learning series, lunch and learns, have their own internal conferences. Associations are, I know they might seem boring. You're like, oh, this is the Dental Association of Northern Florida. But let me tell you, that Dental Association of Northern Florida is also going to talk to the Dental Association of Georgia or the Dental Association of Nebraska, because when you get into an association, they have 49 other states or however many other counties that also have that association. So if you're like, hey, I crushed it at the Dental Association of Northern Florida, I don't even know if that's an association, but just walk with me here. And then you can say, hey, I did really well at this audience over here. When's your next event in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina? Associations are great. And their budgets are usually between 5 to 10,000. And then lifestyle events. You have events like this that you could be speaking at. You have LeaderCast Live, all of these other more lifestyle events that aren't run through a company or a corporation, but rather specific interest groups. So then you book the gig. And guess what? This is how you can sell so many books. I've sold over 100,000 copies of Chasing the Bright Side. 80% of those sales are through speaking events. 80%. And that book was on the Today Show. That book was on some major podcasts. That book was picked as a Apple audiobook of the month. It got some legs, not nearly the amount of sales that doing speaking has brought to it. So here's 3 ways as I close out that you can use speaking to sell books. So the first one is pre-orders. I'm not sure if you've talked about this yet at this conference, but you probably will at some point if you join. Pre-orders, I didn't know people bought books before they came out. I was like, why would you do that? Because they count as sales in that first week that your book is live. So getting pre-orders is a really great way to build hype around your book and have a chance at hitting a bestseller list. So what I would do is let's say my book comes out in November. Starting in September, every single speaking event I would put up a QR code to pre-order my book. And if you did, you could show me in the back of the room and I would give you a signed book plate. This is literally, you can buy them on Vistaprint or Canva. It is a sticker with like your book title on it. And you're basically signing their book as a sticker that they can then put in it when the book arrives. Why people went nuts for this? I'm not sure, but they did. They loved these stickers. So you can get pre-orders by doing these stickers when you speak. The second way that you can use the gig to sell books is make book sales a part of your speaking fee. So let's say you usually quote $15,000 to speak. Well, now you quote $17,500 because now $2,500 of your speaking fee goes towards book sales. So what you say is my fee is $17,500, and that also includes X amount of books, whatever $2,500 will buy you in books. And I can give you a bulk discount for more. That is a really great way to do it, is make it a part of the fee so they feel like they're also getting something special and a special advantage. The third way is selling books in the back of the room after your book is out. You can either do this yourself and buy directly and have the copies in the back of the room and upsell them. Or sometimes you can contact a local bookstore or even a Barnes & Noble and say, hey, I'm speaking at this event. There's going to be X amount of people there. Can you come and sell these books? And they'll sell it through their bookstore. So I know that was a lot. We didn't have a lot of time. So I'm like, let's get it all out. But the thing that I want you to remember, and Chandler might have updated data around this, but this is what I could find. 80% of Americans want to write a book. Less than 1% will. 80% want to, less than 1% will. Commit to being part of that 1%. Commit to being part of it. I'm telling this to you as much as I'm telling it to me, because I'm telling you this third book. I have been, in between baby naps trying to get this done. I'm like, commit to being a part of the 1%. So if this is helpful for you and you want to learn more about public speaking and just kind of getting over your nerves, you can scan this. I have a free Speak with Confidence ebook that you all can use to start speaking with confidence and see if it works as a part of your business plan to sell your book. So I will pause there because I want to leave plenty of time for questions. You can ask me anything, but specifically if you have questions around my decision to go from traditional publishing with a major publishing house to now self-publishing, or tips to start getting speaking engagements, selling books through speaking engagements, those are kind of my beefy areas of expertise. But I will kick it back to the MC and see if we have any questions.
What's happening? Give it up for Jess. Give it up,
Thank
give
you.
it up, give it up. How awesome was that, huh? Love it. And if we'll turn the emojis back on the back wall, love it. There they come. All right. So that was awesome. Jess, thank you so much for coming in and speaking. We're going to dive into some questions. So I want to, AV team, if we can just lower everyone's hands. So we'll kind of do a little refresh here. And then two things here. So if you got a question for Jess, you can drop a question in the chat. All right. And then once we finish lowering everyone's hands, we'll start back with some questions. We might even be able to have time to get a couple questions from the audience. It's fun, full circle moment, because the first time I ever met Jess was when she was speaking at a John Maxwell event. And so, I mean, just an example of speaking at work, right? I would have never known who you are, what you do, and how you could help this audience if I didn't first see you speaking at an event. And so I want to ask a couple questions, and then we're going to get some questions from the audience. I think first question I would ask Jess that might be just relevant for this crew is, how do you juggle things as a mom? Like, I know, I'm pretty sure, like, you just came off maternity leave, if I'm not mistaken. You just had another kid. When I met you, you were pregnant, giving a talk. I'm like, wow, this woman is incredible. So how do you balance things as a mom and having these big goals with books, with speaking, with that sort of thing?
Well, if anyone has the answer to this, please let me know, because it is something I am actively working on. I have 2 under 2 right now. I'm definitely using the Zoom filter to get rid of my under eye bags. But what I will say is that even though I have less time than I typically did pre-kids, my time that I have now, I don't play with it. I'm like, if I have an hour, I am getting my word count in. And so if anything, I feel like I've become more productive with less time. And the other thing that I will say that has become a superpower, I think moms and parents, I mean, just superpower to the max, is writing and speaking is about being able to relate to people. And I now feel like I have a new form of relationship by having kids on a cellular level. So I had no idea how hard this was. And so I think if anything, it's going to make my writing better and my speaking better. It already has, because there's a new level of relatability. So although I don't feel like I've found the balance, I don't know if anyone does, I do think it has actually helped my career as a thought leader in terms of productivity and also being able to relate to people.
Cool. I love that. And I'm seeing a couple of people asking a similar question in the chat around why you decided to self-publish your third book. What's your thoughts behind that?
So back in the day, it was like, okay, you hand in your manuscript and here goes the publisher. Thanks for doing your job. And I now learned that it is still so much on the author to sell their own book, to market it, to do press, to figure out sales techniques. And they're just sending you the numbers and they're sending you what their goals are. And they have things that can help, but it's still so much of the workload is on you. And so when I would do the math of my time and how much of the sales that I'm doing through speaking, the advance that a publisher gives you can feel really attractive. Like, oh my gosh, someone's just going to pay me a chunk of money and then I get to write a book. But then when you actually put like the time to dollars and how much of the sales that you actually bring in, especially when you're a speaker, you're going to do a ton of book sales through speaking. I was like, I did the math. I'm like, I could have made double what my advance was if I had owned the rights and done my own publishing. And so I am now a huge fan of owning your own IP. And if you're already going to have to do the work, you might as well get more incentive because you get a higher dollar amount per book sold. And so it was a business decision, but also maybe it's just me, but I'm like, I want to call my own shots with this. Like I love being in creative control. And so that's another part of it too, is just not being like, oh, I'm behind on their sales goals or what they want for the book. What do I want for the book? Yeah.
Totally. I like that. I always look at self-publishing as entrepreneurial publishing, right? It's betting on yourself.
Totally. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
It's betting on yourself, and you take the upfront risk, but then you also get the upside instead of having that upside captured.
You should do this for a living. That was a really great way to put it.
Oh man. Well, I'm going to ask one personal question. I'm taking the opportunity today to learn from every person that comes in and speaks. And so I asked Gary Vaynerchuk a couple questions earlier today about scaling a business. I want to ask you about scaling our speaking. So I think in your presentation, you talked a lot about super smart ways to get your first speaking gigs booked. Hey, spotlights. Are you a spotlight speaker? You talked about associations, one of that stuff. How would you look at this if you were us? So we'll speak at maybe 3 to 5 events a month. We've built out a speaking team of maybe 3 to 7 speakers. And so I'll speak at one of those, but then we have kind of a speaking crew as well. If you were us, what are ways that you would kind of scale up our speaking gigs, but then also just some of them are free or sponsored gigs? How would you look at kind of transitioning from that to more paid speaking gigs?
Totally. So I'll tell you some secret sauce tips that we teach in Mic Drop Workshop that I think not enough people are doing. I'll tell you 2 of them that I think are really beneficial. The first one, we call it a speaker sister, teaming up with someone or a small group of people who are maybe similar in style, but different in message, and refer each other to speak after you speak. And you can even officialize it and do like a finder's fee, like a 10 or 15% kickback. The thing with speaking is that after you've spoken at an event, they're probably not going to book you again for at least another 4 years because they need to bring new faces on. And so it's no skin off your back to say, hey, are you booking speakers for your next event? I'd love to throw some names by you. 100% of the time, they're like, yes, who do you know? So creating these referral relationships between people is a really great way to not do a lot of outbound pitching, but get a lot of warm referral leads. The second thing that I would say, and this is especially for events that you say like are free or in exchange for something, or you are like conceding on your rate. They're like, oh, we don't have 10, we can do 7. You can say, great, here are the things that I need. An absolute no-brainer is footage and photos. If they are recording or have a photographer for the event, the rights to use that, because those are great for marketing. Footage, you're 4 times more likely to get booked if you have footage. But the 2 things that I think not enough people put in their contract that I've found that events are more than happy to do, and they can have a huge return on your investment, is a written testimonial, but referrals to other events that you would be a good speaker at.
Oh, cool.
So Chandler, you could say like, okay, I'm happy to do this event for free or for X amount. But I would love if you could send my name to 4 or 5 different events that you think I'd be a good fit for, in exchange. And then you put it in the contract.
Yes.
And it has to be within 30 days post event. And they're more than happy to do it. You just have to ask.
I like that. That's super smart. I'm sure the team's taking notes right now. So, hey, if you know any stages we should speak on, let Pedro know. I know Pedro.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's do this right now. I'll take 15%. Yeah.
Okay, done. All right. I'm like, I can hear Pedro in my ear, like, ask Jess if she's got referrals. And we're going to start writing that into our contracts. I love that. Well, hey, we're going to take a couple more questions from the audience. And so if you'll raise your digital hand, if you got a question, we're going to go lightning round. I need to get chat to live over here. And while that's happening, I've got one that I'm going to pull from the chat, Jess. I saw a couple people asking about how to know what to charge for your first couple of gigs. So how do you think about that?
So the starting rate, last year, the All-American Entertainment did a study. The average speaker fee is $15,300. So just to let you know, that's what is average. The beginning rate for speakers is usually anywhere between $500 and $5,000. My first paid gig in when I was 21 years old was for $2,200. And I couldn't believe someone would pay me $2,200 for an hour of my time. But that's a mistake I see a lot of speakers make, is they think and they quote their rate as an hourly rate when really they're not paying for an hour of your time. They're paying for everything that it took you to be able to go up there and speak for an hour of your experience. Mm-hmm. So anywhere between 500 and 5,000 is a great starting point. I would say schools, chambers might be in the 1,000 to 2,000 versus associations will be closer to 5.
Okay, cool. I love that. Well, hey, let's take a couple questions. First one, I want to go to room 2 and Abigail. Abigail's been working with us for a long time, so I want to bump you to the front of the queue there. Abigail, what's your question for Jess?
From colleges, I feel like that's a really good place for me to start as well. Mm-hmm. What was that first college that said yes to you, and how did?
Okay, it was cutting out a little bit, but I think it was, what was that first college that said yes, and how did you go about that? Mm-hmm. The first college that said yes was Marshall University. And so I will always be grateful. But here's the mistake that I made. So after I spoke at Marshall University, I was like, great, all I have to do is cold pitch every other college in America. Easy, right? And so I just started reaching out to all these colleges and saying, I'm a speaker. Here's my story. You should book me to speak. And I was getting nothing, Abigail. I was getting crickets. Gmail shut my account down because they were like, you are sending too many emails. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? And I realized that I was pitching with my story, not my value. So when I talked about what a speaker statement is, in this is I help people blank. That's what you should lead with when you start pitching universities, instead of saying, hi, I'm Abigail, here's my story. It's, hi, I'm Abigail, and this is how I can help your students. That's key.
Ooh, that's good. I love it. Let's go room 1 with DJ. Room 1 with DJ. All right, DJ, what's your question for Jess?
Corporate clients and those kind of customers that are looking for something specific and a good way to interface with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you're asking about how to customize and work with corporate clients, I would
more or less, or just how to get in front of companies that are doing events that are private or whatever, or that don't necessarily have an event organizer, but are doing that sort of thing.
If y'all are not on LinkedIn, join the party. And the first thing that I would do is change that headline in your bio to include the word speaker, even if you haven't spoken yet, because LinkedIn is becoming more of a search engine for professional needs. And so by having that word speaker in there is helpful. And then we call this closest to cash. Who do you know that works at events that you can ask about, or works at corporations locally? Where have you, maybe where you work now has a lunch and learn where you can get started. But using LinkedIn and using the search for meeting planner, event planner, director of learning and development, those are all terms that you can start to put into LinkedIn, and look at your first degree connections. You might know people right now that book speakers that just don't know you speak yet. And that's one of the number one rules I feel like in Mic Drop Workshop is people can't book you to speak if they don't know you're a speaker. So go ahead and start owning that in your bio and your headlines and things that you use. And when you are doing podcasts or talking about your book, start to use phrases like, well, when I speak on this, and a typical question I get asked in an audience that I speak to is this. Start dropping those phrases. So people are like, oh, I didn't know he was a speaker. We should bring him to speak. Mm-hmm. So I got a gig the other day from someone I went to high school with that now works for someone. You just don't know who you already know that can book you to speak. So start owning that word in your bio.
That's good. And Jess, as far as, let's say 2024, for example, What's the breakdown for you between how many of your speaking requests come inbound versus how many of your speaking opportunities are outbound from you reaching out to folks and saying, hey, I'd love to come speak?
So I've been doing this for like 12 years now. And so I would say now 80% of my speaking is inbound or like warm referrals, but we still do outbound. For example, I just got booked to speak at this like Women in Insurance series, and Insurance Magazine did like a cover or did a story about it. And so you bet your bottom dollar, we're sending that article to every insurance company in the United States that, hey, look what I just did. Here's insurance that booked me. Why don't I come speak to your people? So anytime you get like that testimonial or a nugget of experience in a certain group, use that as a domino effect to pitch similar groups instead of thinking, what of the million people do I know? Like, that's why, step number 3 was pick a lane and use it as a domino effect instead of trying to pitch to everyone.
That's great. I love that. Well, this has been awesome, guys. Give it up again for Jess. So fun.
Thanks for having me.
I've got a final question for you, Jess, which would be, give it up for Jess. Let's see it. Come on now. So what would be your parting piece of advice for maybe the person who hasn't spoken yet and they're trying to get outside of their comfort zone, get their first gig booked, knowing what you know now? What's kind of your parting piece of advice? I
will give you actually the number one quoted line from my talk and my book, and it applies to this. It is that failure will always feel better than regret. And so with publishing and with speaking, you're going to get a lot of no's, whether it's like, oh, my book sales aren't what I thought they would be, or I've pitched 20 events and haven't gotten a single one. But failure will always feel better than regret. And in fact, like, we don't call it failure anymore. We call it research, because every time we do something that doesn't work, you now have more information than you did before. So that would be my advice for you all.
That's awesome. Amazing. Guys, give it up for Jess. Jess, thank you so much. I know we're doing book stuff and speaking stuff together soon, so I'm excited to be working together a lot more. Thank you so much for taking the time and being here on a Saturday.
Can't wait. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Awesome. Guys, well, amazing. We've got a couple more.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you can be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. All right, number 1, I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help the podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. If you're on the fence about scheduling a publishing consultation call with my team, maybe you're not quite ready for that, I've got some free training that I think will be really helpful for you. All right, all you have to do is go to register to sign up. Go to selfpublishing.com/free training. When you do, you're also going to get a free digital copy of my new book published. And on that training, you're going to learn the next steps, so how to implement with your book. So how to write, how to publish, how to launch successfully. So go to register right now at selfpublishing.com/free training. I'll see you there.